Yeah. Ah. Yeah. Yeah. Oh boy. Hey, let's talk about strings and string methods. So, we've probably already talked about strings a little bit, but a string is a type, and it's a type that stores text or characters. So we might have a string called name, which equals Kevin. Alright, now, strings are special because they are what we call objects, which is different from these things we call primitive types. So primitive types are really simple pieces of information. For instance, like the number 7. It's a really simple piece of information. I might have a variable called x, which stores an integer and has the value 7. So what happens on the computer when I do that is I make a little box in memory, I give it a name, x, and 7 goes inside. Another primitive type is a character. It's a single letter. I can have a char called let, which equals the best character in the world, q. And when I write that line of code, I make a box in memory called let, and it gets the value q. Now, objects are different because when I make a box called name, I can't fit Kevin inside. That box isn't big enough. It's the same size as basically these two, more or less. Since I can't fit Kevin inside the box, what happens is I go and find a bigger place in memory, actually a number of boxes in a row where I can fit Kevin. And what goes in this box is what's called a reference, or basically an arrow that points me to where that other place in memory is. Now, this is important because when we talk about name, we're not really talking about Kevin. We're talking about this reference. Now, the other big distinction between objects and primitive types, aside from where they live, is that objects can do things. You're an object. You can do stuff. You can store information like your name, your age, your height, your weight, but you can also stand, sit, eat, sleep. You can do things. The number 7 can't do anything. It just is the number 7, that's it. The letter Q can't do anything. It's just the letter Q. But name can do stuff. So let's talk about some of the things it can do. Well, first of all, we have this variable name in our program. So assume we're in like a main method or something right here. We've already declared name. We can ask it stuff. We can say, hey name, tell me something about you. Not just your value, but maybe how long are you? Well, strings can do that. Now what we do first is call it by name. We say, hey name. Just like if I wanted Joe to take out the trash, I'd say, hey Joe. And then I'd say, take out the trash, period. An imperative sentence ends in period. Well, that period comes into the Java program right after the name. When you're going to tell an object to do something, you say name dot, or object, whatever its name is, dot. That dot is called a dereferencer. So over here we said this arrow is a reference. When we talk about name, we're really talking about the arrow. When we say name dot, we're talking about this thing over here. And this is what we really care about. So now that we're talking to the actual string, name dot, we can say, hey, how long are you? What's your length? In this case, it'd give us the number 5. So we could do something with this. We could print name.length. It would print 5. If you're on your computer right now, pause the video, try it. Make sure that works for you. Something that you should notice, too, is when you type name dot, you should see a big menu of options pop up. There are tons of things strings can do. We will probably use 1 to 2% of those methods. That's not to say the other ones aren't useful, they're just probably not useful for what we're trying to do. Now, some methods that I have found pretty useful, and I think you will too, are called char at, and name.index of. Whoops, you had to spell it right now, or it doesn't work. Index of. So char at says, hey name, what's the character at a particular position? For instance, let's say you're doing something, you fill out a form, you put your middle name in, but they really only want your middle initial. So they might say, hey, name, what's the character, middle name, what's the character position 1? Now, this is actually going to cause a problem, though. We've just introduced a bug into our program, because you and I start counting at 1. We would say K is the first letter in my name, but a computer disagrees. A computer starts counting at 0. So when we say, hey, name, what's the character at 1, it's actually going to tell us E, because it says this is the 0th letter and E is the first letter. 2, 3, 4. So when we say name.length, we're going to get back to number 5 because there are 5 letters. But when we say name.char at 1, we're going to get back to letter E. Not what we expect. But now that we know, we can use it. Name.indexof is kind of like the opposite of char at. Instead of saying what letter is at a position, it says what position is at is a particular letter. So if I were to say, hey, name, what is the index of I? It's going to say, oh, the I is at position 3. And it'll give back the number 3. Now, that's useful if you want to find out if a letter's in a word or where it is in a word. But what if the letter's not there? So what if I said something like name dot, what is the index of, how about Q, best letter in the world? Well, the problem is that's not in name. So what's going to happen is the method's going to say, I can't find it, I don't know what to do. But because this method always returns a number, it has to give you back a number. Can't say 0 because 0 would mean it's in the first position. Can't say 100 because then we would think it's in the 100th position. But there's no way to have a negative position. That doesn't make any sense. So to kind of give us a signal that it's not there, this method in this case would return a -1. So if you ask a word the index of a particular letter, and it gives you a -1, it means letter's not there. That's really helpful in some of our programs. Play around with strings, play with some methods, see what you can have them do. Bye now.